Let's bring in Hollywood divorce attorney David Glass for more on this. David.
People going through divorces are going through some of the hardest times of their lives, and a lot of what they're going through is emotional. And in any divorce, there's a huge sense of loss, and loss of relationship, of money, some friends.
We're back again for another episode of the TheHourGLASS podcast, where family law and psychology intersect. I'm David Glass, certified family law specialist, former psychologist, and the author of Moving On, Redesigning Your Emotional, Financial, and Social Life After Divorce. The intent of our show is to help those going through a breakup find ways to make that life's transition easier, more manageable, and also to help people move on. There are a lot of ways to do that. Some suggest humor. They say it's the best remedy and also the best revenge. Our guest this episode is Dr. Christine Gallagher, who has, in her own words, a twisted sense of humor. A number of years ago, she decided to handle divorce by exacting her revenge in a way that hurt no one, but rather looked at the traumatic event through the lens of laughter. Dr. Gallagher reasoned that there were ceremonies for weddings, birthdays, funerals, baptism, bar mitzvahs, so why not one for divorce? Her theory was that divorce, like other milestones, deserved a ritual because divorce was also a huge and dramatic life event. A therapist for many years, she wrote the Divorce Party Handbook. And yes, Christine Gallagher was way ahead of her time because she kicked off the idea of throwing a divorce party. It has now become a popular pastime for many who want to cap off the end to their relationship by laughing their way through it. Some say a good measure of laughter makes it easier to move on. I'd have to agree. Though she realizes that some don't feel like celebrating during such a dire time, she maintains that those who are relieved to be out of a toxic relationship often enjoy marking that life's passage with a fun event. By the way, one of Christine's first books, A Woman's Book of Divorce, 101 Ways to Make Him Suffer Forever and Ever, was a tongue-in-cheek collection of women's stories and the ways in which they sought revenge against their exes. Christine also wrote for Huffington Post and PBS on divorce topics, often humorously. The book we're discussing today, The Divorce Party Handbook, was inspired by the company she founded and once owned, the Divorce Party Planner. Like other caterers and event planners, her company offered only custom-tailored divorce soirees. She has since moved to Central California and no longer has her company, but her party handbook is still on the shelves. It's a classic. I doubt it will ever go out of style. It's an A to Z tutorial on how to plan and stage a festive party. While her Divorce Party Handbook is chock full of fun games and activities, it also offers some practical and sensible pieces of advice. Dr. Gallagher is coming to us via Zoom today, and I have a whole list of questions for her, so let's get to them. Christine, welcome.
Thank you. That was a nice introduction.
Sure. So if a person wants to host a divorce party and plan it him or herself, or they can't afford a party planner, what are the to-do things that are at the top of her list?
It's not that hard, truthfully. My first question would be for them do they want a fun party? And I'll take a little bit of what you were saying in the introduction. The divorce parties are not always full of laughter. There are ones that are more serious, where there's rituals that are done with the ring or whatever. So my first question or my first piece of advice for someone who wants to throw a party is, what's the tone? What tone do you want to set? And be sure that then when you do your invitations, that is communicated to your guests. Right. And speaking of guests, be very careful who you invite, because not everybody's going to go along with a divorce party, if you like, or a divorce ceremony. Some right. People think it's like bad form.
Sure. What do you think is the most therapeutic thing that a person can do at the party if they're the guest of honor?
Well, I think the core thing that happens at these parties when they really work is that the person who's getting the divorce is surrounded by their friends and family. Divorce can be very lonely. and people can feel left out of things and stigmatized. It's still a little bit of that, less so as divorce becomes more common. But the most valuable thing to come out of these parties is just a sense of your friends and your family are with you. It's okay. They're helping you through this transition. They love you. They'll be with you afterwards. And that can be very healing and comforting to people. And I always say to the people who attend these parties, don't then just go home. Stay in touch with that person. You've been with them at this really important time of their life, and check in on them, invite them out. Whatever you do, don't leave them out of things.
Right.
It often happens after divorce. You're no longer part of a couple, and suddenly you're not invited.
Sure.
This is awful.
Now, you often ask each guest to share their best revenge fantasy. Isn't that correct?
That's one game we do. Yes, we yeah.
And so how does that game run, and what's the best revenge fantasy you ever heard?
God, there's so many of them. That particular game, and again, it's one of many, many games, is just, the women sort of are in a circle, and we're talking about the departed one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a way to, fantasize, well, what's the worst thing you could do to this particular person? And going back to my work with female revenge, one of the rules that I had, this is 20 years ago, is, what's going to hurt that person the most? In other words, and I had an example of a woman who was cheated on by a newscaster. So his look was really important.
Sure.
And she, her thing in the revenge fantasies, it was like, well, what could we do? Put like hair remover in the shampoo so he washes his hair. His hair falls out, or, whatever. Just silly things like that. And it's like, I think one of the best stories that I came across in terms of this, and this actually wasn't a fantasy, it was really done, is that the man was totally in love with his car.
Right.
And so the woman was like, how can I hurt this guy the most? I'm going to go for the car. So she unscrewed, it was like a vintage Porsche or something.
Right.
And it had those old panels inside with the screws. So she took a screwdriver and opened up the panel inside the driver's door, and she put a single marble inside the door well. And this guy, who was like a fanatic about washing the car and polishing the car, suddenly there was this mysterious rattle, and it drove him crazy. And he kept taking it to mechanics, and they couldn't find it. And, went on, and it was like slow torture.
Sure.
And I thought, this is great. Finally, he found that they dismantled the car, and she left a little note in there like, you finally found it, sucker. She didn't sign her name or anything, but
Right.
it was like the ultimate practical joke.
It probably wasn't too hard for him to figure out who had left it there.
Yeah, right. But she didn't want to implicate herself in case, then he sued her or whatever.
Right, whatever might come.
There's some very funny stories out there.
I'm sure. Is it ever proper to throw these kinds of parties as a surprise to the guest of honor?
I would say no. My party planning company, we once were hired to do a surprise party, and it fell flat.
Right.
The person involved, and it's, by the way, they're not always women that do, sometimes they are men, but the person that was being celebrated or helped was aghast and just was not in the mood. They weren't there. You've got to be in the right state, and usually it's after the divorce is over, and the dust has settled, and it's time to breathe and think about moving on. And this particular person was not there, and she was just like, ugh. And that was very difficult because we got all the food and everything. It was just awful.
And
So no surprise parties.
Yeah, no more surprise parties after that one. And you talk about burning items belonging to your ex. Why is that so important?
Burning is very primitive, anything like that. There's a guy who actually wrote a book about burning or what was it called? Something about getting rid of the wedding dress. And he wrote a whole book about all these things that he did with this woman's wedding dress, not only burning it, but like using it to tow a truck, a truck tow rope, crazy stuff. But burning is really can be very satisfying. The flames, and it's like when you burn an old love letter and it goes up and it's like, okay, bye, that's done. It's very cathartic. It came I think you may have read in the book, one of the first things that we did was with a woman who had a disastrous relationship with a man, and he ditched her for his previous wife, just boom, gone. And she came back to LA, and we were all her friends and everything. And she had stolen, if you like, a hunting trophy that they'd had over their bed. And it was like his first hunting trophy. It meant so much to him, deer and everything. She took it and brought it back, and she's like destroyed and everything. So we had this very primitive party where we had this huge bonfire outside, and we had barbecue, and it was just tequila, and it was just women, and the flames and everything. And the highlight of the night was taking the trophy and throwing it on the fire and just watching it burn up. And people do a lot of burning or burying of things, like burying. There's a whole thing of burying a ring. There's a woman somewhere in the country that sells little ring coffins. There's a company in Japan that where you can go and smash your ring. You have to pay money. You go and you get a hammer. You could do that at home. Why do you have to pay for smash your ring?
Right.
But anything like that, again, it's a physical sort of release of emotion. And yes, it can be just silly and fun, but it can also help,
Sure. And the guy you referenced with the book, it's Kevin Cotter, 101 Uses for My Ex-Wife's Wedding Dress.
It was so funny. I'm so jealous. I didn't think of that book.
Now, do you suggest that people celebrate the anniversaries of these divorce parties?
No, I don't. I wouldn't recommend that. I would, you do the party and it's time to move forward. This is all about putting it in the rearview mirror, resolving whatever feelings you have. And truthfully, like I say, this is not for everybody. I mean, as you know, as an attorney, a divorce lawyer, people have a lot of emotion, and divorce legally, I know, because I went through a divorce, legally it's hell, not to mention incredibly expensive and annoying. And the emotional part is not really taken care of when you go to divorce court and all that. It's all very chop, 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 and pieces of paper and writing checks and blah, blah, blah. And the divorce party is it goes hand in hand with that. Here you've done the rational, settling of the business and the money and everything. And then, well, what do you do with all these feelings? Okay, so the two kind of go. So usually the party comes after everything's resolved and move forward. No, I wouldn't go back every year. Hopefully you're onto other things by then.
Absolutely. So I've just got to know, what was the most fun party that you planned, and what took place there that made it the absolute best divorce party you ever planned?
Well, I've had, it's like saying, what's the best piece of cake you ever had? There's been many. There was one that was particularly memorable. It was an older lady, kind of very conservative suburban lady, who found out that her husband, who had told her he was learning golf, taking up golf, right? He was a businessman. He was taking up golf on Friday afternoon. And she happened to notice that the golf clubs in his trunk had never been used. They still had the plastic things. I mean, guy, just take the plastic off and rub a little dirt in there. Right. Yeah. If you're going to lie, do it properly. Anyway, it was all a cover. Obviously, he had an affair going on. And she was devastated. And, she thought she was happily married. The kids were grown, grow old together. She was absolutely and her friends hired us to come in and talk to her. And, poor thing, it's just horrible. And so we did have in the company, we had certain turnkey parties that we had, like Survivor Party, Lemon Party, whatever. But we did like to do specific parties that somehow centered around whatever happened in the breakup. So we suggested to her that we do a golf themed party, and so we had the, the invites and everything. Everybody had to wear sort of golf clothes and golf shoes. And we hired a really handsome young guy that taught the ladies how to swing a club. And that was fun. We had little golf balls with the husband's little face on it, And then the coup de grace was we took the golf clubs and made them into, what do you call it? Where it's for barbecue, the long, like spits or whatever.
Yeah, long skewers.
Yeah, skewers. Okay. And so we did a whole barbie using the clubs, the terrible clubs. And it ended up, this lady finally was able to, especially with all her friends loving her and surrounding her and everything, could finally see the humor in it. And that this guy had done something really bad. It wasn't her fault. She wasn't to beat herself up thinking that somehow it was her fault. And she was able to let go of it. And it was not, when those things happen, it's not just fun, but it's gratifying to see, as you know, as a ex-psychologist or whatever, if you, when you see somebody come out of the darkness, it's a lovely thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I'm thrilled that you wrote the book and giving people who are so inclined the opportunity and the step-by-step planning to plan one of these divorce parties.
Yes, well, thank you.
And I thank you especially for joining us today. If you're thinking about getting revenge, do something positive or humorous, something non-violent. Just make sure that what you choose to do is not harmful to you or to your ex. We always end with a song choice where the lyrics send a message about time and love, and today, revenge. There were so many to choose from, but I chose The Best Revenge is Letting Go by Fearless Soul. Nearly every word has profound meaning, but it's the simple refrain of the song that says it all. The best revenge is moving on.